Buster said, "Where did you learn to do that?" Which I, of course, took as a great compliment. When what he actually meant was, "What, did you just step out of a time machine?" Fortunately, Buster liked old-fashioned singing and boys. He hired me for the musical version of Bus Stop. I was making my Broadway debut, and I was ecstatic for about a week. And then Buster called me back and said, "We've lost our capitalization." I ran out of money, took a job doing summer stock at Casa Mañana in Fort Worth, Texas, where I found myself doing a terrible rock adaptation of Twelfth Night called Your Own Thing. It did have one thing to recommend it, however. It starred a local beauty queen who had just been crowned Miss Fort Worth. She came into rehearsal the first day, 10 o'clock in the morning, before coffee. She leaned her elbow on the broken-down upright piano. She rested her cheek on her palm. She opened her mouth, and out came the most amazing sound I had ever heard. It was Betty Buckley. A few months later, she would move to New York, star in 1776, and the rest would be history. But about a week later, Betty took a phone call at the old wooden phone booth in the corner. She stuck her head out and said, "Ed, it's for you." I took the phone and I heard, "Hi, honey, want to do a Broadway show?" It was Buster Davis. He told me that they'd gotten the rights to an old clunker from the 1920s called No No Nanette. That it was going to be directed by the famous old movie director Busby Berkeley, who had invented the overhead shot. That it was going to star Ruby Keeler, who had starred in most of Busby's movies. And did I tap dance? All my life, I said. I'd never even touched a tap shoe. I went zooming back to New York to make my Broadway debut, and I was ecstatic until we started to rehearse. Picture you upon my knee, just tea for two, and what the fuck? We'd already had Hair. Pippin was playing. A chorus line was just about to open. Nobody near us to see us or hear. We were all looking for other jobs and thought we were in the biggest bomb of all time. Then we went to our first out-of-town tryout city, Boston, and $1 million worth of sets and costumes arrived. That's $1 million in 1970s money. The curtain went up on the first preview at the Schubert Theater, and Ruby Keeler appeared at the top of a grand staircase, and the audience went wild. Who knew they even remembered her? She hadn't been out of the house in 30 years. Then she came down to the deck and started the big tap number. I want to be happy, but I won't be happy. She got to the end of it and she started to do trenches. Trenches are hard. Ruby was 60 years old. She kept doing trenches. Then the line behind her joined in, and the line behind them, and then finally those of us at the very back who could dance the very least join in. We get to the end of the number. We hit the final pose. The audience leapt out of their seats and threw their programs in the air, like cadets graduating at West Point. And we all stood on stage and cried because we realized that not only were we not in a big bomb, we were in a great big hit. Isn't it true? We took the show back to New York, and it was a great big gold-plated Broadway smash. Every old Hollywood star who was still ambulatory got on a plane and flew to New York to see Ruby Keeler in No No Nanette, and they all came backstage afterwards and met all of us. What was that like for a kid directly from the sticks? I defer to Marvin Hamlish. Every night we would stand on the stage and stars would come back. Stars would come back, toned and tanned. Lucille Ball, Bette Bacall, Joan Fontaine met me at Dixon. Richard Nixon shook my hand. He was just as gross as I thought he would be. He had drafted me for Vietnam, but I checked the box because I had to be me. And so here I am. All the stars looked exactly alike because they all had the same hairdressers and the same plastic surgeons. Except for Richard Nixon. He looked like the creature from the Black Lagoon. They all were someone, but I was no one. Just some poofter singing backup for some star. I wanted to be someone, but I was no one. Because being just another chorus boy in the back of some old musical won't get you very far. I started to audition for absolutely everything. I had an audition to be a soloist in Leonard Bernstein's Mass, which he was composing for the opening of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Now, what chance did a kid from the sticks who's in the chorus of No No Nanette have of becoming a soloist in Leonard Bernstein's Mass? I got called back. I found myself in a giant audition room facing Leonard Bernstein, Alvin Ailey, the famous choreographer, Oliver Smith, the famous designer, Gordon Davidson, the famous director, a whole row of rich men in suits, and one very young man in very tight pants who was sitting very close to Leonard Bernstein. I sang opera, I sang lieder, I sang art songs, I sang musical theater, I sang jazz, and then the young man in the tight pants said to me, "Do you have something contemporary?" I thought, I cannot believe that Leonard Bernstein's trick is addressing me at my audition. I was very grand. It turns out that the young man in the tight pants was Stephen Schwartz, who had Pippin, Godspell, and The Magic Show running simultaneously on Broadway that year. He was 22, the same as me. They hired me to be a soloist in Leonard Bernstein's Mass. And I found myself in Washington, D.C., looking up at the newly constructed John F. Kennedy Center, rising from the Potomac like a giant white marble Kleenex box. I went to the top and looked out over all of Washington and all of the magnificent monuments, and I was very full of myself. I had a little solo at the beginning of the Mass that went, "What I need, I don't have. What I have, I don't own. What I own, I don't want. What I want, Lord, I don't know, no, 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 I don't know." I would sing it for all I was worth every time it came up. Eventually, some hippie dude stage manager said to me, "Hey, man, how do you manage to make so much out of that little solo?" And I said, "Because that's the only time in my life I'm truly alive." And he said, "That's pathetic." It was the first time I learned that crew members could be a great deal smarter than performers. There would be others. We recorded the Mass for Columbia Records with Leonard Bernstein at the podium, and then we moved it to the Metropolitan Opera, where it ran for 6 weeks. I found myself in a star dressing room behind the gigantic stage of the Metropolitan Opera, and I found myself standing center stage at the Metropolitan Opera, singing my final solo in the Mass, which was a half step higher than I could actually sing. Of course, many very famous singers have found themselves standing center stage at the Metropolitan Opera singing something that was a half step higher than they could actually sing. But I didn't know that then. And then this magnificent express train to glory ended, and I was just another unemployed singer/actor living in Hell's Kitchen. What was that like? It was not like a song by Vincent Youmans and Irving Caesar. Picture you upon my knee, just tea for two, two for tea, me for you, you for me, alone. Nobody near us to see us or hear us, no friends or relations on weekend vacations. We won't have it known, dear, that we own a telephone, dear. Day will break, and I'll awake and start to bake a sugar cake for you to take, for all the boys to see. We will raise a family, a girl for you, a boy for me. Can't you see how happy we will be? I was unemployed for a very long time. Eventually, I got... Oh, pshaw.